It's the RJ Ochoa Show on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star. What's going on in Jerry's world? What's the latest from Cowboy Camp? Find out right here. Friday mornings at 7:30 and 9:30 with the manager and editor-in-chief of Blogging the Boys, RJ Ochoa. Here's Robin Rudy.
It's a show within a show. It is the RJ Ochoa Show. Inside of the R&R Show. Welcome aboard, RJ. How are you this morning?
It's great to be with you all. Happy Friday. Pretty bummer of a start to the Ryder Cup for the United States.
What's going on? Oh, really?
Kind of embarrassed. Not going to lie. Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to talk to you about that off air. As you know, Fridays, RJ, we just got off the phone with Coach Mike McCarthy. And toward the end, I was trying to lead him down the path of, look, man, there's nothing wrong. I asked him, when did it become a negative thing to be a game manager? And Mike, being super smart, was like, I don't know where you're going, but if you're going down the path of you're trying to consider Dak Prescott a game manager, you would be totally wrong. That didn't go how I thought. But I honestly, RJ, I don't see anything wrong with it, but I understand Coach Mike McCarthy not wanting to put that out to the world, that he feels like Dak's a game manager, even though they're handling him like one.
I would disagree that they're handling him like one.
Really?
I think it's a funny question, given your Facebook post right after the Cowboys lost to the Cardinals.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But
I don't know what you're talking about.
There's a great line that I'll steal from Bob Sturm of the Ticket and now his own Substack when he talks about quarterback play. He says you have to be the thermostat. You can't be the thermometer. Some players are the thermometer, and they reflect the temperature of the room. But when you're the thermostat, you have to set the way things are. And so I know the term game manager or bus driver is cute and gives you butterflies and makes you feel like you can moonwalk. But I mean, if you don't believe that Dak is a thermostat, then I don't know that you've been watching the right and appropriate things for the last
what I'm saying is, let's say he was whatever you want to call it. Why is that? When did that become a bad thing? Like, is the goal to win Super Bowls, or is the goal to make your quarterback feel like he's better than he is? What's the goal?
I mean, I agree with that as a general philosophy. But I mean, so in this case, these are two different subjects, right? Like, is Dak one of these things? No. But is being one of these things a bad thing? Because even game managers or bus drivers get hot, right? I mean, Joe Flacco threw 11 touchdowns and no picks in the run to win in Super Bowl 47. Eli Manning did it twice, right? Like, but even then, like, I think the term implies that you are incapable of doing anything, that you're only a thermometer, that you don't have the ability to set the temperature by any stretch. I think people would say that somebody like Mac Jones is maybe a glorified game manager, that Zach Wilson in his best efforts could be a game manager, that Daniel Jones might be a game manager, but I agree with Coach McCarthy and that Dak Prescott's nothing like that. Good for him, clapping back. I'd like to hear he snapped on a Friday morning.
His owner, Jerry Jones, said post-game on Sunday that they were limiting Dak, that they were holding him back, and then the few things that he was still allowed to do, they made a whole lot easier to do.
Get him, Rob.
I mean, but just because they're easier to do doesn't mean they're holding them back. You know what I mean? Like, and I would offer that they didn't make anything easy on Dak in Arizona. I mean, it was tough sledding. It was really difficult. And that's not to exonerate Dak. Like, Dak can't play that poorly. I mean, again, we live in a world where, despite popular belief, multiple things can be true. But yeah, I mean, it's just, that's the way things go. Right?
There's
like
no room for a reasonable debate here, RJ. Yes, both things can be true. With that in mind, the truth is that Belichick is going to do some things that we expect. They're going to take away the primary weapons, and I'm sure when he looks at the Cowboys, he looks on one side of the ball and says, well, I need to stop CeeDee Lamb. I'm going to need to deal with the run game. What do you think that they're going to try to take away from the Cowboys, and how are the Cowboys going to come back against that?
I think CD is kind of, at the very top of that list, especially given that CD blew the game for the Cowboys or for the Patriots the last time they matched up. I think Tony Pollard's at the top of that list. look, I came on here for the last 2 Fridays and I was screaming about how stupid everybody was about, taking Mike McCarthy too literally about wanting to run the ball. Here we are. Tony Pollard leads the NFL in carries, is on pace for more work than Zeke Elliott got in all but one of his seasons. So I don't know that I'm eating the crow, but it's in the oven, just in case, I mean, so that's a bit of a tough scene, but so yeah, I mean, that's who they've been. Like, again, not to go back to Rudy's, original point, but like, I think that Bill might make Dak try to throw the ball. I don't think the Cowboys want to throw the ball a ton, want to rely on throwing the ball, but I think Bill might, stack the box. Tony Pollard faced the fewest amount of stacked boxes from a percentage standpoint last week. The Cardinals, allowed it because they didn't want Dak to throw. Which I think should give you a point of how respected he is by an elite defensive mind of Jonathan Gannon. But I mean, they were like, yeah, I mean, go ahead. I mean, we're gonna take this, and you can go ahead and make this game go by quickly if you want to try to run the ball, and that's going to work against you, and you're going to be the one running at a time.
Obes is going to be making the play calls here. The Cowboys have had a little bit of problems with Obes over the years in his offensive calls. Is there any worry with a different kind of offense as opposed to the Matt Patricia brilliance from last year?
So it's a little bit of breaking news to me that anyone has ever called him Obes. But I like it.
Yeah, he act like he knows them on the first, like, they're boys, RJ.
Obes, yeah. DQ,
yeah, whatever.
They're all out there.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. Speaking of DQ, I mean, like, I know the question is about Bill O'Brien, but like, maybe Dan Quinn isn't the greatest coach of all time, and I love Dan Quinn. I mean, but goodness gracious, like, have y'all seen anybody coming for him after his defense allowed 200 yards in the first half?
No one
against the Cardinals.
Great point, RJ.
Again, I don't mean to come on here and bag on Dan Quinn for no reason, but like, let's keep balance in the force. You know what I mean? Like, if we're gonna come and say Dak sucks, McCarthy sucks, well, tell me about this coach who y'all are saying is the one who's really in charge, the one who's running the show, about how his side of the ball with all these players who we're hyping and gassing up as being legendary all-time, Micah Parsons, Tank Lawrence, and J-Ron Curse and everybody. Like, you can't tell me that dude got punched in the mouth and run all over and that, like, it's 0% his fault. And so I find it rather – and now, to your point, Rob, it's like, well, what are we going to do about Bill O'Brien? Well, we're supposed to have Dan Quinn. Dan's supposed to be the guy who takes care of this. Like, why is this even a level of doubt in our mind? It's because Dan Quinn, again, might not be the greatest coach who's ever been involved in the Dallas Cowboys organization.
Going back to last year, RJ, and we talked with Coach McCarthy about this. They never lost 2 in a row. I'm not putting as much like worry into this game as some people. They don't lose 2 in a row under Mike McCarthy with this core group. And to me, I feel like while both things can be true, Bill Belichick can be the GOAT, but what has he taken away from teams since he lost Tom Brady? I think it's at this point without Tom, it feels more like urban legend. Like, well, Bill's gonna take something away. He ain't been taking away much since Tom left.
They were a pick 6 away from beating Philly in week 1. I mean, that's the defense that I'm worried about. I'm not kidding.
Okay.
I mean, that Rob's point is fair, and the game that Dallas played against them 2 years ago, I mean, despite Dallas having a pick 6, I mean, they gave up a 75-yard touchdown right after. Again, shout out to the almighty Dan Quinn. But I mean, I agree that it's a little bit like going to a museum. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, well, give me my headphones and I'll go press the exhibit numbers. You know what I mean? Like, you're not catching Bill in his prime or anything like that. But and while they never lost 2 games in a row last year, who cares? Like, it's this year, right? Like, I mean, like that means nothing. And I do, I thought it was so interesting last week. CeeDee Lamb was asked about, obviously at the time the Cowboys were walking on water and how great of a start they'd had and things like that. And he said, look, I mean, we can't prove anything in the first 2 weeks. We're looking forward to week 5. And I thought it was really interesting that he specifically said week 5.
He said that.
I know. And that's obviously the San Francisco 49ers game. And so I do hope that the loss last week rattled the cage enough to where it's like, hey man, like, quit looking down the road to San Francisco. And because you can go beat those dudes in October, but at the end of the day, like, they've owned you in January. Like, getting this regular season win will be important, but it won't mean the end of the world. And so, but the fact remains, that's not a given of a game. You might lose that game. So if you lose this one, and then you lose the one against one of the best teams in the NFL, all of a sudden you go from 2-1 to 2-3, and things are really kind of piling against you, even though you did lose 2 games in a row throughout all of 2022.
Interesting. That's RJ Ochoa of Blogging the Boys. He joins us every Friday for insight and intrigue. Monday, was it Monday or Tuesday? The Kyle Pitts rumor kind of jumped out there. And while, Atlanta shot that down pretty quick, it does reflect, I think, at least on the periphery of the star, if not inside the doors, that there is a little bit of concern about tight ends' ability. Is there some credence to the fact that they're still looking and might be looking outside the star for another tight end?
This was an amazing rumor to pop up because this was the true, this was emblematic of how panicked Cowboys fans were, that they just kind of willed this rumor into existence. It was their cope. I think the reality of it isn't necessarily, the Cowboys missed Dalton Schultz, the Cowboys need a tight end, Kyle Pitts this or whatever. It's they have struggled in the red zone. Think about it. We're 3 games in. CeeDee Lamb doesn't have a touchdown. Michael Gallup doesn't have a touchdown, right? Like, Brandon Cooks doesn't have a touchdown, right? Like, this wasn't the start, from that perspective that we anticipated. And, CeeDee's been great. Gallup had an amazing game last week. Yes, it sucks that it was in vain, but they're just not scoring. And so it seems like what's the path of least resistance? It's get more playmakers in here, get whatever. And it's weird. It's not that they're, struggling to get near the end zone. It's just that they can't do it. I can understand how somebody would say, we need these big, strong dudes to get down there because we suck at this right now. And that's going to be the thing. Like, I'm very fascinated to see their first red zone opportunity on Sunday. If they get down and they have to settle for a field goal, it will be a tough scene. And there's nothing more emblematic of kind of their overall dysfunction right now. I don't know if y'all saw this. I wrote about it. Brandon Aubrey, who has been amazing.
Yes.
He is the first kicker in the Super Bowl era to attempt at least 10 field goals in his first 3 career games and make all of them, which is really cool, right? Like, it's awesome. Like, kudos to Brandon Aubrey. Like, shout out to the MLS and everything. But, like, this is pretty dependent upon opportunity. And so it's like, well, this is cool, but, like, I kind of wish you didn't have all these chances early on to set this really unique record.
But this is the thing, and I'm trying to stay glass half full because, I'm trying to erase this hater thing. When they do flip this switch, if they do, RJ, up 3 weeks into the season, they are double their trips into the red zone from last year. So with the ability to what they're doing between the 20s, if they do figure this out, this could be very dangerous for Philly and San Francisco. Since CeeDee wants to bring up San Francisco, we'll go there.
Well, that is a really glass half full perspective. I think you should be embarrassed of the Facebook post that we're talking about and maybe go delete it because that was,
wow.
That wasn't of this particular mindset. But that's well said. It's not often I can say great point, Rudy, about the Dallas Cowboys. And so, and that's true. And like some of these things, there's natural regression to the mean. We've talked about that a lot, used that phrase a lot. The Cowboys were the number 1 red zone offense in the NFL last year. Like, what a shocker. You're not going to be number 1 this year. But if you do stabilize, you don't always regress to the mean, right? Like sometimes you regress to the other end of the spectrum. And so right now that's kind of where they're at. But I do think that's a great point. There is something, again, if you're trying to manage expectations, trying to cope, whatever, these dudes don't play preseason, takes them 3 to 4 weeks to kind of find their form. And to the, fact that sometimes weird crap happens in bulk, and they've kind of dealt with that. And I think to your point, the fact that they had such a deficient level of success in the red zone in the first 2 weeks and still had a point differential of 70 to 10 in those 2 games is, signifies kind of how well-rounded they are. I do think, again, if you're really trying to reach and give them all kinds of excuses, the Trayvon thing last week had to have been this big-time shell shocker of a thing. It happened on Thursday, less than 72 hours before kickoff. They had to travel, right? It was just, they were clearly not themselves, and it showed in just about every way.
RJ Ochoa sitting with us for his regular. Talk about the offensive line play. Grade the play of the offensive line last week with the guys that did play.
That's the thing. If you're, giving that context, right, that could be grading on a curve or kind of handicapping the situation because, you were down 3 starters. I mean, I think it was all right.
Yeah.
Given the circumstances, it was all right. In fact, do y'all know who the first penalty was called on of all 5 offensive linemen who started last week? It was Terrence Steele. That's the thing. Like, okay, Terrence, you're supposed to be the big veteran right here. You got the big contract. You can't false start on the first third down of the game. And so in a weird way, it was kind of an encouraging overall performance because while nobody wants to see that particular assimilation again, it is a matter of like, well, hey, they have depth at all these positions, right? Like,
with that in mind, RJ, there is some depth, and that offensive line wasn't bad, although it looked like McCarthy was planning on calling the game with a bad line in play. How much did that lead into who plays and who's needs to play this week? I mean, how desperate are they to get Biotish back on the field?
I mean, I think they have to be all-time desperate to get everybody back, right? Like, they wouldn't say this. I mean, and it's just an assumption, but I mean, they kept Tyler Smith on ice in week 1. And I mean, that felt like, living for the marathon as opposed to the sprint. And they kept him on ice in week 2 and Brandon Cooks. And so, they got away with it. And it was, look, they were 12.5-point favorites, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure they thought like, hey, let's, this is not the Super Bowl. We should be able to get out of Dodge with a win here, even without these 3 dudes. Let's give it a whirl. And I mean, last week was a huge indication at how mortal they really are. Just the same mortal. They bleed the same blood as all of us. And so, I mean, I think you have to be all-time desperate to get everybody back. I mean, look, we're on Tyler Smith's 4th game of his 2nd season, and we still haven't seen the intended offensive line play 1 game together. It's literally never happened. They've never had their intended offensive line together. And so that's not why you're desperate. You're desperate because these games matter. These games are significant. I mean, you keep dropping them, and yeah, you might scrap it together and get in the playoffs, but the difference between 12-5 or 13-4, 11-6 is massive.
I think the easy low-hanging fruit has been Mozzie, RJ. Like, well, he was a first-round pick, and he's not even starting. But when I look back at the numbers, the 207 yards came outside of the tackles. Now, other than Dan Quinn, who are you blaming for that? And, can D-Law get Micah up to speed enough to fix this? Because, D-Law's the run stopper. He's the magic man when it comes to that. How can you get Micah up to speed, and how do they fix the outside the tackle runs?
Yeah, look, I mean, Micah has more than earned the right to talk and to say whatever he wants, like over and over and over again. But Micah came out and was like, yeah, they want to run it right at me. Go for it. I dare them. Well, whoops. They did. And it didn't work. So, I mean, to your point, I mean, like, it's a matter of like, you have to be a different player, right? Like, like people bag on Tank Lawrence because, he doesn't have the sack numbers and things like that. But like, you can't just like come out in 5th gear when you're playing run defense. And I'm not saying he's an over-aggressive player, but like, you have to shift. Like, you're not doing the same thing. You have to be able to adjust, and you have to be able to withstand that and absorb all of that. And I mean, you have to be ready for that. And that's the thing, like, Micah's now at a point of greatness where teams are going to do that. I mean, it's no coincidence that it was Jonathan Gannon who, I know was the defensive coordinator, but he was on the Eagles staff last year that were the first team to do that. I mean, like, the book is out, and if people are smart enough, they'll open it up and read it and find all the answers. And until Micah shows that he can defend outside runs, teams are going to do it all day long, I would imagine, starting on Sunday with the Patriots.
This is one of those funny things that happens during a season. It's come up around the star here with Micah Parsons running some tight end reps. What's the likelihood of the possibility of seeing Micah on offense?
I mean, the Cowboys are all-time careful with Micah and how many defensive snaps he plays, right? Like, they're trying to preserve him because they believe they're a playoff team and they want him as fresh as possible for the tournament. So, I mean, there's a higher likelihood of Rudy J running a snap at tight end for the Cowboys than Micah Parsons.
He might be the best one on the roster.
Yeah,
he might be from an athletic perspective, but I mean, if you spent a 2nd-round draft pick on a tight end and then you trotted Micah out there, I would freak out. I would scream. I would look like a child with the tantrum I would throw.
Great point. Matthew Judon, I talked to Coach McCarthy about him. He said that they're probably going to be looking at double team. Since they're not catching many red zone touchdowns, I'm guessing the tight ends are going to have to help out with him because he is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, kind of an underrated defensive superstar. The Patriots haven't had the spotlight on them, the last few years the way that they used to. So people don't necessarily put him in the Micah, T.J. Watt, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa conversation, but he's right there. I mean, he's a problem. Like, he's a dude who can completely ruin the game. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. It's like, okay, we don't have Kyle Pitts. So the non-Kyle Pitts is in the room. Y'all are in charge of double teaming Matthew Judon, and we'll just kind of live and go to work that way.
All right, so the Ryder Cup's sucking it up. Astros ain't playing it in. What's going to keep you happy this weekend other than a Cowboys win?
Well, first of all, the Astros are coming off of an important win.
Yeah, they did get one. You're right. It's been a rough week. Good
win.
The
Mariners win last night keeps things all the more tense. This is a great sports weekend. Like, I put this up there with all-time sports weekends. You've got baseball regular season coming down to the wire. There is a number of permutations that can happen. Some are highly stressful. Some are incredibly, awesome. You've got the Ryder Cup, although granted right now USA's got their tail tucked between their legs. You've got college football. Obviously Colorado's going to beat USC and flip this whole thing upside down.
Of course.
You've got the NFL in action, the Premier League in action, and Survivor came back on Wednesday. The Amazing Race came back on Wednesday. Lego Masters came back last night. The reality television landscape is at an all-time high. I don't have enough screens. I mean, like, I have, a lot going on. I don't have enough time to watch and enjoy all of this. And not only that, to read all the recaps, to listen to all the podcasts, to see and hear all of the analysis. Like, this is a full-time job on top of everything I'm doing already.
Wow, you got a tough life.
Yeah, you do. Your grade of Micah on Edge.
Oh, the show?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a really entertaining personality.
He is, right?
So,
it's good for us, for what we do, right?
I mean, the other thing is, like, it's not only good for us, but it's actually kind of bad for us because he's so, like, forthcoming that he kind of, like, diffuses any potential, this, that, or whatever. Like, he'll be straight up and honest, and then he'll own it. You know what I mean? So it's not like there's ever any, like, controversy about it. What I love about Micah Parsons is he's just like a normal big-time sports fan who happens to be one of the best football players in the world. I don't know if y'all saw last night, he tweeted, he got a lot of heat over the summer for how many NBA jerseys he wears, and people think he's a bit of a bandwagon fan. And so because he's from, Pennsylvania, so he's the Sixers guy, but now he's the Mavs guy, and he also likes the Warriors. So he tweeted last night, he was like, y'all better believe I'm getting a Dame jersey. He was like, go Milwaukee. So, I mean, it's just, he also had a Jason Tatum jersey. Like, again, he was just all over the place. I mean, that was the only bad look for him and all this stuff.
Belichick let Zeke go crazy or leave him on the bench?
I don't know that it's possible for Zeke to go crazy at this point, Rudy. I mean, again, all due respect. And I think that storyline will quickly fizzle out. He's just a different player now. And that's okay, right? Like, we had some good times. When we were all at summer camp 15 years ago, remember when we were over down by the lake and remember what we all saw Rob doing? You know what I mean? Like, it was a good time, but it was in the past at this point.
Well, RJ, we thank you for your stop by. Enjoy your full weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
I hope each of you has a scoop of vanilla ice cream before the weekend.
And I hope your insurance agent answers the phone here shortly. I don't know what the heck is going on, but whoever you're on the phone with, hope they answer. You pressing buttons and stuff. But yeah,
I've had some morning sinus, so I had to kind of clear my throat. So my AirPods died, so I'm doing the phone
got you. Okay.
So I muted it because I didn't want the audience to know that, but you just exposed me, so I had to explain myself. So thanks for that. Now
you're actually on camera, RJ.
Yeah.
He is RJ Ochoa. We'll talk to you next week. This is R&R. You're on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star.